Hello, I'm Dr. Cheryl, and welcome to Wake Up with Dr. Cheryl. The theme of our show is raising the consciousness and awareness in the relationship with wealth and applying unconditional love. Always remember that your present situation is not your final destination. The best is yet to come, by Zig Ziglar. I'd like to start with a little joke. A kid called up his mom from his college and asked her for some money because he ran out of it. Mom said, "Sure, sweetie, I'll send you some money. You also left your calculus book here when you visited 2 weeks ago. Do you want me to send it up to you?" Oh yeah, okay, responded the kid. So Mom wrapped the book along with the checks in the package, kissed Dad goodbye, and went to the post office to mail the money and the book. When she gets back, Dad asked, "Well, how much did you give the boy this time?" Mom said, "Oh, I wrote 2 checks, one for 20 and the other for 1,000. "That's 1,020, yelled Dad. "Are you crazy?" "Don't worry, hon," Mom said, as she kissed Dad on the top of his bald head and I taped the $20 check to the cover of the book, but I put the $1,000 one somewhere between the pages in chapter 19. Our special guest this evening is China Galland. I invited China because I thought her purpose would be a wonderful example of unconditional love in action and a wake-up call to raising the awareness around prejudice and creating healthier and wealthier relationships with different cultures. China Galland, M.A., is a prize-winning author of several nonfiction works including Love Cemetery, Unbearing the Secret History of Slaves, Longing for Darkness, Tara and the Black Madonna. She's completing the documentary film Resurrecting Love, an East Texan African American community's struggle to reclaim the Love Cemetery, the historic burial ground they own. China's The Bond Between Women, A Journey to Fierce Compassion was chosen as one of the best 5 books on spirituality by the annual Books for a Better Life Award. China has been a professor in residence at the Center of the Arts, Religion, and Education at the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, California, the largest consortium of Christian schools of theology in the U.S., as well as the research associate and adjunct faculty. Art, Darkness, and the Womb of God, the graduate level intensive, grew out of her pioneering work on the divine feminine cross-culturally. She has been affiliated with the Graduate Theological Union for over 20 years. Her Images of Divinity Research project at GTU's Center for Women and Religion. A riveting storyteller and public speaker, China has lectured at Harvard University, Columbia, Cornell, Bowling Green University, and Prescott College, among others. She led pilgrimages in the divine feminine in Nepal, India, France, and Spain. Appeared on Good Morning America, Bloomberg TV, PBS, NPR, and PRI's To the Best of Knowledge. China is married to the playwright, performer, and co-founder of the former Traveling Jewish Theater, Corey Fisher. China is also a grandmother of 6. I guarantee that once you start, you will not stop, and when you are done, you will have discovered the healing power of Love Cemetery. And that was what Bill Moyers, and through the Bill Moyers Journal, said about it. This is the first segment of a 2-part discussion with China. Welcome, China, and thank you so much for coming on our show. You know, I didn't have enough time to read your Love Cemetery completely. But I realize after looking at everything that you've done, how understated you are. You are totally understated. And, you know, you're a pioneer. And I just want to honor you for being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, my goodness.
Well, I think that you're, you know, as I said in the intro, I think that, you know, you're a good example for what you are doing. You're a good example of unconditional love. And that's what my show is about. I mean, that's ultimately in wealth relationships, that's what it's about. But I would love, you know, can you share a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of time, but because I know we have so much to talk about, and I know 45 minutes is going to go very fast.
I think I got to wherever this place is that I am in this moment, and that was a beautiful compliment about being an example of unconditional love. But I, you know, that would be wonderful. I struggle like everyone else. It's a practice for me, and I actually learned a lot from someone who'd been enslaved about love. Someone in the African American community who ended up being a great teacher for me, though of course I never met him. He was dead by the time I met his descendants, who told me his story, Sam Atkins. But
is he part of the
yes,
love?
he's in this book.
Okay.
Yes. He's the sort of tutelary spirit of the book, and I'll tell you his story in a moment. But I think I got into this place and writing about this historic black cemetery in East Texas because, first of all, my family's from that part of the world, and I was back visiting family when I was asked by an elder African-American woman, the keeper of love, the keeper of the cemetery, the guardian, to help her get back in because the community had been locked out since the Civil Rights Movement, since the 1960s. This is outside of Marshall, Texas, which is about 30 miles from the Louisiana border. So
in growing up, sorry, hold that
that's
thought.
what I was going to say.
In growing up, had you been aware of this?
No, I knew nothing about this.
Okay.
It wasn't that far, maybe a mile and a half as the crow flies, from
Oh
my
my
great-grandmother's house,
Oh, okay.
where I stay to this day. But I didn't know. But here I live in California, and I end up writing about and getting very involved with this community, this very small community in East Texas, outside of Marshall.
Yeah, how did you get involved with that?
Well, because you started to ask about my background, I think I just never quite fit anywhere. And so, you know, like an oyster, you have a choice when you don't fit. You either find a way to be with that not fitting, or you do something, I think, to mask the discomfort. So actually the discomfort has been a great gift. And I realized in looking back at growing up in Dallas, Texas, and going to a Catholic girls' school all my life, that though the nuns always taught us that we were all God's children, I didn't see anybody else who wasn't white like me. I saw a lot of African Americans and Mexican Americans and Latinos in Dallas, but they all, almost to one, seemed to be in positions of being in a service position, which I didn't understand why my grandmother's yard man, Nash, who I adored, couldn't come in the front door.
Wow.
Why she sort of surreptitiously would hand a glass of ice water to him in the heat when he was standing outside, just dripping with perspiration. And then when she took it back, wash it very carefully immediately. So all these messages, I took in, but I learned quickly when I asked that I was told that's the way it was. And so things didn't fit for me right from the beginning. So I just had this awareness of the discrepancy, though I didn't have words for it. I was too young.
Sure, makes sense.
So I think writing and whether it was with my first book going into the wilderness, that was really about undoing my upbringing as a white woman in this culture. and having that wildness that we all have in us as human beings, in this culture being confined to sexuality of the bedroom, as opposed to it being an independent spirit that everyone has, if they're fortunate enough to be able to
Or a free spirit.
live it. Yeah. So I think these books are all making peace with the parts that haven't fit. And coming to understand them. I mean, I think it's the way I learn. Every artist is different, but I'm actually quite slow and inarticulate in some ways. I have to go in a room, close the door, think, and really work at what words can capture this.
Oh, yes.
So that's a little bit of my background.
Well, I applaud you, because I'm sure it wasn't easy. I mean, like for myself, we had 2 black families in my neighborhood, but my father always said, and I feel very grateful for this, he always said, give everybody a chance. Everybody. I mean, we entertained different nationalities because he worked for Boeing, and we, but, they actually would ship in blacks from Seattle into Bellevue to come to my high school. So the migration started happening, and I didn't think twice of it. I was just, I was open because that's the way I was raised. Even though my grandfather would say coons, I used to just, not comfortable. Right. But I never said a word because that was my grandfather. So I think we all have, on some level, have some degree of inequity teaching of.
Oh, I was raised in a completely racist background. Yeah, in Dallas, Texas, and growing up in the 50s and 60s, and in this culture, it's not just Texas or Dallas or the South.
Right.
What so many of us don't understand is our entire culture is seeping with this poison of racism that is very, as a white person who hasn't had to bear the kind of daily inequities of a difference of some kind, then it's taken me quite a while, I think, to understand that better. And that's been part of the gift for me of being asked by Mrs. Britton, the keeper of love, to help her get back into love before she died.
So how did that happen, getting back to the Love Cemetery?
I just was back visiting my family. I have some wonderful cousins over there in the countryside. My family lived on the outskirts, about 10 miles outside of Marshall, because they had a nursery business. They raised plants. And that's all gone now. But some of the family still lives out there. So years before, actually, I think in '82, I was back with my daughter, who hadn't been at her great-great-grandmother's house since she was 4 years old. She was getting ready to go away to school. She was going back east. And so we went back to see her grandfather and all kinds of cousins. And I took her canoeing on Caddo Lake, which is a beautiful, it's the only natural lake in Texas. It's half in Louisiana, half in Texas, full of sloughs and bayous and swamps. And it occurred to me it would be wonderful for her to know some of the stories of that place. Bill Moyers is from Marshall, too.
Oh, gosh.
And Bill had featured a delightful older storyteller, a white man, Wyatt Moore. But his stories had already, they were known. They were more about moonshine and rum running and gun running in the swamps. I wanted her to hear from a woman. An instinct told me an older African-American woman. So I tried to find someone who had grown up in that place who would be willing to talk to us and tell us something about the lake and what it was like.
Was it hard to find a woman that would openly talk about it? Oh, good.
No. I mean, the 102-year-old that I thought we were going to see wasn't well that day. Oh. So I ended up meeting another woman with whom I'm still friends, Kizzy Mae Hicks. And the stories that Kizzy told me, And Kizzy was actually more is more my contemporary. She's a little bit older than me, but more my contemporary. And she and I and Madeline visited after she was working as a fry cook on the lake. And after she got off work, she started telling me stories from her family because her great-grandfather had been enslaved.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
But the stories she told me, I'd never heard. You know, he had, Jeff Hicks had owned at least 300, if not 600 acres of land. I didn't know black people owned land.
Yeah.
Much less anything more than 40 acres. I was completely
Did
ignorant.
did they outright buy it, or would like their enslaver like give it to them? You know,
It's different in different situations. He bought a lot of that land. A lot of people bought their land, sometimes over time. Sometimes it was through cotton. Sometimes it was through farming. Sometimes it was given to them because they were actually their children.
Oh, right.
That's what one of the old real estate men told me.
Yeah.
That many of them felt badly when they saw how hard life was after the emancipation for people who suddenly, they had had no names of their own. They'd been stolen from Africa in the first place and were descended. So they were not awarded money. They were not awarded land. What did they have? There were suddenly 4 million people freed in 1865. So it was quite an upheaval that created all kinds of chaos and liberty and joy and backlash and horrors and violence and that we're still contending with, because we've never in this country really been willing to tell ourselves the truth about how we built this country, how we founded this country by curling its very being around the contradiction of race and slavery. So many of the founding fathers were slave owners themselves. Some were not on principle, many were. Many knew it was a moral dilemma that would have to be faced in some way at some time, and it never has been. And I think that's why we're seeing Ferguson now, Staten Island, all the horrors that now has broken out into the mainstream press, that if you've been a student of, it's American history, it's not just black history. It's what we've often left out, wanted to ignore, reject. When you begin to fill in the picture of how we brought this country into being, how we built the wealth, which was on cotton and slave labor. And it wasn't just the South, it was also the North, because they were shipping and banking and insuring.
Sure.
So there's still cemeteries like Love that have people who were enslaved buried in them all over this country, from Vermont, Connecticut, New York, major African American burial ground. It's now a national monument on Broadway in downtown Manhattan. Part of it, in fact, runs under Wall Street. When they were digging the foundation for the new federal building on Broadway in Duane, in, I believe it was 1991, they began coming across skeletons and bones.
Oh my gosh.
And so at first the workers just took them off the limits and nobody said anything. But finally somebody blew the whistle. They'd hit a burial ground.
Oh my gosh.
A burial ground. It turns out it's probably about 6 acres, contains probably 15,000 people from the 17th and 18th century in downtown New York, in Manhattan, going under Wall Street, down near City Hall. You know, we literally built this country on the backs of people who were enslaved on lands that were stolen from the Native Americans.
This is appalling to me. I have never heard of this before. It's appalling to me.
What? You've never heard of what?
You know, the burial of, you know, what you just told us.
Oh, how we've just layered over the history.
Yeah,
just paved over it, built over it, destroyed it, if we could, sometimes. But this was a burial ground in the 17th and 18th century for Africans and African Americans, enslaved and free. So it's an enormous site. That when they began looking, they found the maps for where the people who were African American or African were buried.
So have the government acknowledged this?
Yes,
I mean,
George Bush made it a national monument. It is
Okay.
administered by the National Park Service. And it's a national monument it's on the same level, as I understand it, of the Statue of Liberty. Very few people realize it's there.
Yeah.
It now, only in the last few years, have they had an educational center that goes with it
Oh, good.
to explain it. But
Yeah.
they had to stop the federal building. They had to give green space. There's a
Oh, good.
magnificent
Good.
monument.
So there is real acknowledgement.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Powerful acknowledgement.
Good.
Everyone should visit that when they go to New
Oh,
York.
absolutely. And
Broadway and Drain.
the African Americans should be proud. I mean, considering.
They are. Yeah. Not even considering. It's just, I've been thinking about this idea that struck me. I don't know if one could really say this, but it seems to me, I recently was able to see, I'm part of the San Francisco Film Society.
Right.
The documentary film we're making, Resurrecting Love, that came out of this book about Love Cemetery.
And I can't wait to talk about that.
Well, the San Francisco Film Society is our nonprofit sponsor, so people can donate funds, which is how we're making it.
Right.
And we were anyone who was a member of the Film Society was invited to a screening of the new film, Selma. Oprah's in it, she's one of the producers.
Right.
It's a fantastic film. It reminded me of 12 Years a Slave, except 12 Years a Slave was more a compendium, very realistic from everything I've learned and studied about slavery in the last 30 years.
I watched that movie and oh my goodness. Oh, heart-wrenching to me.
Well, good.
Yes, absolutely.
It is.
That's
it
what
is.
it's supposed. I mean,
So
the reality.
This film, Selma, is really an American film, and it's a story that many of us know because we lived through the 60s, at least my generation, and it's such a powerful, moving, exciting story. And what occurred to me, and I've been also looking at some of the classic civil rights series, Eyes on the Prize, that PBS ran. There are multiple episodes in that. I don't remember if they're 12 or 14. And we're fortunate enough to have as our editor one of the people who edited on that series, who's amazing. It occurred to me that perhaps we could say that we didn't really have a democracy until the civil rights movement, that it was brought to us by our African American brothers and sisters who ran out of options and absolutely relied on what we said this country is. A country founded on the basis of freedom, liberty, and justice for all.
Right.
That's what the civil rights movement was built on, our word.
Yes.
Our founding
And yet we didn't give it to them.
No, our founding envisioned that, but often we can see further than where we are in the moment. So I'm not passing judgment on anyone so much as saying we created a country in a paradox. Slavery was our original sin. Slavery and the attempt to commit genocide on Native people and steal all their land, all the inequities. Yeah. And we did it to the Spanish, the Chinese, whomever. But only the people from Africa were dragged in chains against their will. Right. They didn't emigrate in any way. They weren't already here. So their story has a unique turn because of that forced passage that they had to make to get here, the Middle Passage. And so it's difficult to understand America if you don't know about this history.
Yeah. So why do they call it the Love Cemetery?
They call it Love Cemetery because it was named after Della Love. Oh. Della Love was an African-American woman who deeded the 1.6-acre cemetery to the Love Colored Burial Association in 1904.
Oh, okay.
But we had the chief archaeologist for the state of Texas come to see because the older people kept saying, there are more graves in here than there are markers. Then some were temporary markers. They'd been locked out for 40 years, but we would discover a grave, or one afternoon, one of the young people out helping us had dropped a hammer, and it pinged. It didn't make a thud like it would if it landed on dirt. It had landed on cement. And we rolled back the duff, all this litter and of leaves that was covering it. And there was a cement cover on the ground. And they said there are a lot more of these in here.
Oh my.
So that's the only one we'd found so far. So the chief archaeologist came up with a ground penetrating radar. And he said, this cemetery is a lot older than 1904. He said, this is a rare gem. There's a deed, there are markers, it's beautifully sited, there are people still living who are related to the people who want to take care of it. This is very important. So that was an exciting turning point in the history of this cemetery that they say that Jim, the archaeologist, said is at least 175 years old. Goes back to about 1830 at least.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has people. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll leave you with this. Self-discipline is a form of freedom. Freedom from laziness and lethargy. Freedom from the expectations and demands of others. Freedom from weakness and fear and doubt. H.A. Dorfman, American Mental Skills Coach. The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. Be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using the word to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word in the direction of truth and love. Don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a projection of their own dream or illusion. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be a victim of needless suffering. Don't make assumptions. Find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. Always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to sick. Under any circumstance, simply do your best, and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. Never give up. First, be aware and conscious of your thoughts, and catch yourself before they come out of your mouth, especially the negative thoughts into words. It takes being sedulous, persevering, and disciplined. Be grateful for whose you are and where you've come from and what you have, and be grateful for your freedom. And eat healthy. Good nutrition feeds the mind and your body temple. Don't forget to exercise, feed your spirituality with meditation and prayer. Thank the divine. Love yourself unconditionally. Stop criticizing, stop judging, and allowing others to dominate the way you feel and think about yourself. Be compassionate and share your abundance and wealth with others. When fear knocks, let faith answer the door. Wealth is the ability to fully experience life. By Henry David Thoreau. Thank you, Marin TV, for facilitating our show, and especially my crew, Eric, Ginger, and Jack. Please support and become a member of Marin TV. Bye for now. Until next time.